Good afternoon, Butterfield Trail Village. I'm glad you're here with us today. My name is Riki Stamps, Director of Programs and Events, and it's April 14th, 2021. I'm very honored to have Lewis Epley, Butterfield resident, join me today for casual conversation. Lewis and Donna are native Arkansans, and they have been residents of Butterfield Trail Village since 2006. That's a lot of years, and we're so fortunate to have the Epleys living here at Butterfield Trail Village. What I can tell you is both Lewis and Donna care deeply about the University of Arkansas and the greater community, and there are so many ways that I want to share with you, and Lewis will share with you what their passions have been all these years they've been married about the university and the greater community. Lewis, welcome. It's so glad to see you.
Thank you.
I enjoyed coming to see you and Donna yesterday and visiting you at home. It's been so long since we've been able to sit down and have a real conversation. And I was just in awe of the many contributions that the two of you have made and continue to work on with the University of Arkansas. But because there's so much amazing information that deals with the University of Arkansas, I'm titling that the Razorback Report, and we're going to circle back to that in just a minute. What I didn't realize until we'd known each other for several years is that you were actually born in Springdale.
Yes.
I just assumed that you were born and lived in Eureka Springs your whole life.
No, I was born in Fort Smith.
Ah.
And my father worked as a line type operator and a printer at Greenwood, and my mother was teaching school in Greenwood, and that's where they met. And then Dad got an offer to come to Springdale to be a linotype operator, and a linotype operator, it's a machine that sets the type for that they print newspapers from. They're obsolete now, but he was one of the best, and he knew not only how to operate them, but how to fix them. And other newspapers, I remember going to different places with him to work on their machines when I was young. And we went to Huntsville one time, and there was a gravel road going to Huntsville.
Well, that's been quite a while ago, and line typing, is that what you called it?
Linotype.
Linotype. It's an art form. I mean, it's a lost art form, actually.
Yes.
And your father did that his entire career?
Yes. For the Northwest Arkansas Times, and I was later a printer, not a printer, but a part-time reporter for the Times at the Springdale office that my mother ran for the Times. And I would became acquainted with a lot of the people, the hierarchy of Springdale as a newspaper reporter.
Oh, I bet you have some good scoopy stories
Yes, I did.
that you could share.
Yes.
Oh, well, Springdale, of course, in those days was a very small community, and I know you've witnessed the amazing growth that it has had over the decades.
Well, I could ride my bicycle all over Springdale when I was a kid.
Okay, so you obviously attended Springdale High School.
Yes.
And in our conversations over the years, I learned of what you described as the most pivotal moment in your life. So you're a happy, healthy, young senior at Springdale High. Tell us from there what happened in your life.
Well, I came down with, I'd gone over to play tennis at the Methodist Church tennis court, and the next day I was not doing well. I was worn out, And I just thought I had overworked myself playing tennis. But my mother had read a article in the newspaper that day about the symptoms of polio. And of course, back then, polio, everybody was scared of polio because they didn't know how it came by or who got it or what have you. And she called, the doctors made house calls back then, and she called Dr. Cisco, and he came to the house, and he agreed with my mother that I had the symptoms, and he said we need to take him to the hospital and do a spinal tap on him. And this was the new Springdale hospital that was on Quant Street, I believe it was. And they did the spinal tap, and they confirmed that I did have polio. Well, they put me in an isolation room at that time, and there was 2 rooms that connected through that were both isolation rooms. And there was a 14-year-old boy in the adjoining isolation room that the nurses could go back and forth to without going into the hallway, only he was in an iron lung. And an iron lung looked like a big hot water tank that was on a pad. And I would go to bed. I was confined to bed, but I would go to sleep at night listening to the bellows in that iron lung that was forcing this young 14-year-old to breathe. And then one night it got quiet, and there was a lot of going on out in the hallways and between my room and the next room, and I could see the loading dock from my bed. And then after a while, I saw Gilbert Cisco, who was the mortician in Springdale back then, back up the hearse into the loading dock, and I see him take out the gurney, and I heard the gurney come down the hallway and go into the adjoining room. And then I saw the gurney go back. I heard the gurney go back down the hall, and Gilbert loaded it up, and I couldn't help but wonder why God had taken that young boy and left me. So at that time, my left arm became paralyzed. I could no longer lift it up off the bed. And when they discharged me from the hospital, they sent me to Jacksonville, Arkansas, to a children's convalescence center because physical therapy was not prevalent in northwest Arkansas at that time. And I went down to Jacksonville, Arkansas, and there were 75 of us there, and I was the oldest one. And I started feeling sorry for myself. Poor Lewis, why did this happen to me? How long am I going to be here? And I did not get any positive answers. And one evening, in street clothes, a young RN came into my room, and she started dressing me down like a Marine drill sergeant would dress down a recruit. And she says, I can do more for you here than most any other folks here at Jacksonville if you just cooperate with me. But if you don't want my help and if you don't want to work with me, why don't you pack your bags in the morning and go back to your home and open up the bed for somebody who does want my help and who will work with me. Well, during the night, I didn't sleep much that night, and I decided that I'd better get with the program, and I started working with her, and we create with the exercises that she did with me, and then when they saw that I would work hard with the exercises, they would let me go back to Springdale if my mother would come down and agree to do the exercises, and which she did. And the physical therapist even typed out a couple of sheets of paper telling my mother how to do these exercises, and I still have that paper in my memorabilia. And so I came home, and Mother and I did do the exercises as prescribed. And I could no longer, I'd been one of Harry Hinckley's, who was the director of Springdale school system, was getting was going to set up a new band program, and it was in the basement of the big 3 or 4 story red brick schoolhouse on Old 71.
Mm-hmm.
And his name was Harry Hinckley. And to get into the band room, and he taught me how to play a clarinet. To go into the band room, you had to go down some wooden steps, and then they had put wooden planks across the coal dust so that you wouldn't get your feet dirty with the coal dust going into the band room. And Mr. Hinckley taught me how to play a clarinet a little bit. I never was very good, but good enough to be about a third chair, I guess. So when I came down with the polio and came back to school, I missed the first semester of my senior year, but I was able to come back for the second semester of my senior year, and I still hung around Mr. Hinckley in the band room. And Springdale was going to host a regional band marching contest, and Mr. Hinckley wanted me to announce the bands, which I was thrilled to do. And the judge of the contest was E.J. Marty, who was director of the Razorback Band, and he was in the press box with us, and during the course of the evening, he asked me if I was going to be with the band when I graduated, and I told him, "No, sir, I can't play anymore." And he said, "Well, son, if you want to be a part of the Razorback Marching Band program, you come see me when you get at the university on campus, and we'll find something for you to do." And I did. And he asked me if I wanted to be the public address announcer for the band shows. And I said, "Yes, sir." And I did that during my entire college career. at the University of Arkansas. And one of my most memorable events was Arkansas went to the Cotton Bowl, and I traveled with the band, all their out-of-town performances, and I got to sit in the press box at the Cotton Bowl and announce the University of Arkansas Marching Razorback Band.
Go Hogs.
Go Hogs.
I love it. That's a
And
great story.
so that's how the band, the members of the band, put their arms around me and made me feel like I was a part of the band. So that's one of the reasons that I have been tried to be a promoter of the band and help to raise money for the band program throughout the years.
You were surrounded by a lot of people who cared about you and who gave you the determination you needed to get through that.
Yes.
And I'm sure you had some very dark, sad nights wondering what was going to happen, as many children across the country at that time. And I think people were placed in your life, Lewis, to bring you to where you are now, and we'll talk about Ms. Corinne in a minute.
Well, can we go to me getting to the university?
Please, let's do.
I'd always planned on going to the University of Arkansas, and some of us in Springdale carpooled to the university in Fayetteville. And but
Well, when you came to the university, you enrolled in law school, correct?
no, I went to the business school first.
Okay.
I spent 7 years at the university, 4 years in the undergrad in public administration, and then 3 years in the law school. And I thought that I would always come back to Springdale to practice law, but some of the powers that be in the legal field in Springdale at the time told me there wasn't room for another lawyer. There'd been 4 or 5 lawyers come into new ones come into Springdale while I was in school, and that I needed to. Eureka Springs was looking for a young lawyer. The young lawyer had died the year before. He was in his 60s, and it left the 2 old lawyers. One of them was 85 and the other one was 86, and they were both looking for somebody to toss the load to. And it was Festus or Restus Butt, better known as F.O. Butt, and he was the father of Tom Butt, one of the judges here in Fayetteville years ago. So I went to Eureka Springs, and that I kind of threw Donna a curve. We'd been dating my last year in law school, and she thought I was going to become, she was an RN at the Veterans Hospital in Fayetteville.
And I believe you were set up on a date by friends.
We were set up, yes. We were set up, I hung around Charlie Davis's law office in Springdale, and Donna worked with Charlie's wife as a nurse at the Veterans Hospital, and they decided that we needed to meet. So they very properly invited them, both of us, to come to their home for dinner, and I got to take Donna home that night, and I decided I wasn't going to let her get away from me. That's and we've been married, 59 years now.
And you barely dated a year before you decided to tie the knot.
Right.
Well, you two go so well together, and you complement each other extremely well. Anyway, in Eureka Springs, you were still in the law firm.
And I got it that as the young lawyer and I was interested in medical care, I guess because of my polio and having been to Jacksonville and what have you, that I became very involved with the Eureka Springs Hospital in one position or one way or another for about 35 years. And at one time received the Washington Regional Foundation Eagles Award for my work in health care, and then when I became I'm skipping on you now, going to the Board of Trustees.
The accolades have come to you on a regular basis, so interject those when you feel like. I mean, you also, while you were in Eureka Springs, you served as vice chairman of the Bank of Eureka Springs.
Well, I'm still
associated.
I'm still vice chairman of the, it's now called
CS Bank, I believe.
CS Bank. But I've tried to resign 3 times, and they will not hear of it, but they have agreed that I can attend the bank board meetings on Zoom, which I did yesterday, and I can see them and they can see me, and we can talk back and forth if need be. So I'm still vice chairman of the bank, and it's been very rewarding for me. I really enjoyed it.
How long did you practice law in Eureka?
Till we moved to Fayetteville. It was over 40 years.
So you moved from Eureka Springs to Butterfield?
No, we bought when we were spending so much time in Fayetteville when I was on the Board of Trustees and coming to basketball games, Eddie Sutton and what have you, and the football games, that we bought a house over here on Brandon Circle, and we lived in that until thought we'd live there for forever, I guess. I knew about Butterfield, and I had watched Butterfield start to grow and what have you back then. But a young couple rang our doorbell one Sunday night and asked us if we wanted to sell our house.
Wow.
Well, I said we did in maybe 2 or 3 years and go to Butterfield. And they said, well, we don't want to wait that long. So I said, well, let me think about it. And we finally made a deal on the house that we had at Brandon Circle. And that's how we came to Butterfield, what I would consider early. But they had a Village Home 5 that was empty at the time, and it did not have the kitchen that Donna wanted in it, wanted. But we camped there for a spell until till Butterfield could build the village home with the kitchen, that galley kitchen that Donna wanted. So that's how we got to Butterfield as early as we did.
Well, we're glad you came to Butterfield Trail Village, and I've enjoyed getting to know both of you over the years and your struggle with your polio story, but you did not let that bother you. And there is so much material that we could all read. That was a very, Americans were held hostage during those years in the late 50s and 60s with the polio outbreaks. And you have shared a book with me, A Paralyzing Fear, The Triumph Over Polio in America. And I glanced through it. I've not had time to read through it. But it really, in the days we're living right now with pandemics and epidemics, this shows the true American spirit and how our people have been frozen in time with these types of diseases, but how we also overcome it. And if you care to order this book, I'm sure it's on Amazon, but I spoke with Lewis, and I'm going to try to obtain a copy for the Butterfield Library, so we can all refer to that as a reminder. I still have my vaccine scar. They really did a number on a lot of arms back then, but I'm so glad they had it. Absolutely. And I think right now would be a great time to talk about a project that you and Donna were involved in, and that is the UAMS Physical Therapy Department. Tell us about that.
Okay. Because of my experience with physical therapy and how important it was, I talked to the chancellor for UAMS in Little Rock and other folks, and said that I would make a substantial contribution if they would start a physical therapy program at UAMS in Fayetteville. We already had a building. We didn't have to build a building, and it's the old Washington Regional Hospital down on
College and Leverett, I
College,
believe.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, why they took me up on that, and we started a physical therapy program there, and it has been very successful. And most everybody who has come through the program has graduated and has a job. And I wanted to, because of that physical therapy school involvement, I thought about my physical therapist that had treated me, that gave me the strong speech about cooperating and working with her, that I tried to find her, but I hadn't been unsuccessful. But a young lady by Dina Wood, who worked with UAMS as a fundraiser, she pecked around on her computer one night and found this lady in Cape Coral, Florida. And she'd got a copy of her voter registration card, and it had her telephone number on it, and she called her the next day and asked this lady if she had been a physical therapist in Arkansas, and she said yes. And she said, do you remember Lewis Epley? And she said, no, but I remember a young, dark-headed fellow, young fellow. And Dina says, would you talk to him if he calls you? And she said yes. So I called her the next day, and we talked. And I told her about the new physical therapy program that I was helping to sponsor at Uams. And I asked her if she would come up and visit the physical therapy program, if I sent her an airplane ticket and got her a motel room, and she said yes. So I picked her, she did, and I picked her up at XNA, and we had a real nice time together.
And her name is Corinne Wolken Larson.
Yes.
And she kept her maiden name as her middle name, and that's how Ms. Wood was able to find her. But she was at the dedication in 2015, correct?
Yes, she came for the dedication, and she's been back a couple of other times when the graduating group have wanted her to come back and be their commencement speaker.
Something that Lewis pointed out to me when we were visiting yesterday, you could just see it in his eyes how much this person meant to him. And although he only was with her for a short time, all those years he knew that she was the reason that he pulled himself up by the bootstraps and made himself continue on.
What I found out when she came, that she was only 4 years older than I was at the time.
Wow. Isn't that something? And has continued in physical therapy throughout her entire career.
Yes, she was. She even did. She became very involved nationally in physical therapy programs and speaking and what have you, and talking about physical therapy. So she became more than just a physical therapist. She became a proponent to help others become physical therapists.
And something she said to you is something that you'll always remember, and it is now permanently inscribed on a wall at the therapy department. And it is, what do you do with what you lost is not important. What you do with what you have left is what is important.
Well, that's been very important to me, because a few years ago I had been reading about post-polio syndrome, which could happen to polio patients 20 to 40 years after the fact. And I'd been up here at Butterfield, I guess for lunch, going back to our village home. I felt I had a strange feeling in my left arm, and I could no longer raise it above my head. I'd always been a two-armed hog caller, but after that I became a one-armed hog caller.
But with 100% vigor, I can guarantee you that.
But this is the most I can do with it now, with the post-polio syndrome. But it is what it is, and you march on and keep going.
And don't focus on what was lost, but what you need to do to move forward. Absolutely. One thing that I want to point out, I'm just going to call off some things with the university. You served on the Board of Trustees again, and I believe you were appointed by,
by Bill Clinton.
yes. You served on the UA Foundation Board, University Board of Advisors, Arkansas Alumni Association Board, and you also have a professorship. And I'm sure I've left out several things. But while you were busy with your career and working and helping the university in all these different aspects, you became strongly involved with Rotary Club, civic organization. Tell us about your time and what it was about Rotary, and then some projects that you helped with.
Well, the motto of Rotary is service above self. And I became involved in Rotary first in Eureka Springs, and when we moved to Fayetteville, I transferred to the Fayetteville Rotary Club, and still Rotary Club of Fayetteville, and still go to that, only we've been having our meetings on Zoom because there no place to eat anymore. But Rotary has been very important to me. And when Bill Gates started a program to eradicate polio in the world, I became very interested in that program. And he was raising money. He'd match it 3-1, I believe it was, that whatever we would raise, he would match it. So I started going to civic clubs and Rotary clubs and whoever would listen to me in northwest Arkansas and southern Missouri, asking them to raise money to match Mr. Walton's money and to help eradicate polio in the world. And as a result of that work, I won a contest and was able to go as the team leader for a team who went to Chandigarh, India, to administer the polio vaccine to those young children.
Do we have that photo
And
of his time in India? There we go.
Yes, and one of those pictures, I'm squeezing 2 drops of the polio vaccine in a 2-year-old baby's mouth. And
How many did you vaccine on your trip to India?
A lot.
A lot.
And the other picture up there is with some of the young people that I administered the polio vaccine that day. But it was quite an experience to go to India, and we were in northern India. On a clear day, you could see the Himalaya mountains in the background.
Wow.
So it was quite a trip.
I'm sure, and I know that the service the Rotarians have done for polio is just amazing.
Yes.
And the millions and millions of dollars that the clubs have raised to eradicate polio.
Yes.
Do you happen to know if there are any statistics right now on polio worldwide?
I think it's been eradicated. Except for two countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Mm.
And that's hard for the polio eradicators to work in those countries, because everybody is suspicious of what they're doing.
I see.
But fortunately, we're down to Afghanistan and Pakistan, and are the two remaining countries that there's some wild polio virus.
I want to jump back onto the University of Arkansas campus.
Okay.
Go Hogs. Tell me about the Epley Band building. As your continuing support and love for marching bands never left you through all these years.
Well, the university band program would be in wherever they could find a place to rehearse. They had, and one of the buildings that they were rehearsing in burned down, and they lost everything.
When was that?
Oh, it was.
In the 80s or 90s?
Oh, it would have been, had to have been in the 80s, I guess. And that was when I decided that since the band had been so important to me, that I would do something to help the Razorback Marching Band and the whole band program. And so I helped to raise the money for a new band facility. And when the building was dedicated, Don and I were invited to come over for the dedication ceremony, and my mother came with us. And the Board of Trustees surprised me. I think I think Donna knew, because they relied on her to help get me over there. But the Board of Trustees named the building in my honor because I had been such a, I guess you might say, important part of the program, and I had done that because they were so important to me during my career at the University of Arkansas.
And I'm not sure exactly which football game this happened, but there's a wonderful photo Lewis has of the band spelling out his name on the Razorback football field.
Yes, they.
And wasn't that the only time that's happened?
No, they did. It was done 3 different times.
For you?
For me.
Yes.
And one of them, they had a big banner from, I guess it was the 30-yard line to the 30-yard line, that said, "Thanks for your 50 years of support."
Of support. And Lewis, I want you to understand, I understand that you are not bragging about these things. And but I'm so proud that you're sharing this with me and with the audience, because it's important that we have people engaged in our community and in our universities. And you and Donna have done that so well. And there's been so many young people to benefit from your caring and your giving and your time. And that's why I wanted to visit with you. And as this continues, I want to share with the audience, Ms. Donna is a 30-year registered nurse. And health is also in her demographics and her conversations and career. And that's when I learned that she was a nurse, and then the next project started at the university. Tell us about the Center for Health Professions.
Well, that is a building down on the upper part of Razorback Road. And it was an old infirmary building. And I wanted to do something for the Elder Man nursing program. And I made a substantial contribution to rehabilitate that building for the nursing program.
I remember that building, and it needed
Yes.
serious rehabilitation.
Really serious. And we were even able to put in mannequins in it that the nursing students could practice on. And one of them could even deliver a baby.
And that's something.
And
I took a tour for the grand opening, and these mannequins, they were actually in hospital beds so the students could practice their skills on what simulated sound and breathing, anything that a patient might be undergoing.
yes.
It's interesting.
And after 200 deliveries, this mother wore out, and we had to get a new one.
I can see where that would wear somebody out.
But
Oh.
I wanted to put Donna's name on that building, but she wouldn't hear of it. So we finally settled on it, the Epley building for health professions.
And of course, the two of you, I'm sure, are still being kept apprised of the program and how things are going, and it seems to be doing quite well.
Yeah, my dermatologist that I go to had a daughter, and he wanted to see, she was going to go there, and he wanted to see what the building was like before he agreed to it. So I took him down there and had him a real tour of the building and the mannequins and all that, and he agreed that his daughter could go there.
Well, I know that you've missed out on several meetings and things with COVID. A couple of your organizations are doing Zoom, which is great, and you may just decide to keep doing that. But what's on the horizon for Lewis Epley? Anything you want to share?
Well, I guess at age 85, I'm on borrowed time. So I guess where it's appropriate or where I can be of some help to the things that I'm interested in, why I still would like to be a part of and keep on marching on.
Well, thank you so much, Lewis, for your philanthropic work, your care of the university, its students, and the greater community. We're very honored that you and Donna have been a part of this community.
When I was on the Board of Trustees, it was my privilege to present an honorary Doctor of Laws degree on Mrs. Jones of the Jones Truck Line and
Bernice Jones?
Yes, in Springdale. And then we and then I was able to present Hillary Clinton with an honorary degree from the University of Arkansas.
I saw the pictures, and that's quite a historical moment for the two of them. Wonderful people. Well, I just appreciate you being here today, and I want to say hi to Miss Donna. She is your biggest fan,
Yeah.
obviously. And we just hope to see you both around, and hopefully COVID will, and social distancing is going to start phasing out, and we can spend a lot more time together.
Well, it will be, I guess if the dining room ever opens up again, that we will be able to become acquainted with more people at Butterfield, because we're kind of spread out now.
We are spread out, but I think slowly but surely we will all be back together eventually.
Yeah, so, well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate you so much. I will be ordering a copy of A Paralyzed Fear for the Butterfield Library, and I'm sure if you have any interest or questions for anything from Mr. Epley, he'd be happy to visit with you in the
Certainly.
future. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Please join me next month when we'll be interviewing Dr. Lloyd and Seaton and Dorothy Seaton. Have a wonderful day.